Hi all, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a deep dive into water. I'll be talking about water conservation, why it's important, who is affected by droughts and water poverty, and then I'm going to go into a couple of ways that you can reduce your water consumption. I make videos about intersectional environmentalism and little things you can do to help the planet, so if that sounds like your thing, be sure to hit subscribe and like this video so you never miss another one. So water is a renewable resource. We learned all about the water cycle back in grade school, how it's naturally recycled by the earth. So why is it so important for us to conserve water if it just naturally goes into the atmosphere and falls back down as precipitation? And why are there places like California who have been suffering from a lot of droughts lately? Long story short, Earth will never run out of water, but this doesn't mean that water will always be easily accessible. Different parts of the water cycle take different amounts of time. For example, it could take thousands of years for water in the ground to go through its full cycle and fall back down to Earth as precipitation. Humans mainly use fresh water, obviously, and only about 2.5% of the Earth's water is fresh water, and a large majority of that is actually frozen in glaciers. So overall, humans only have access to about 1% of the water on Earth. Something to think about when we're looking at places with droughts and water shortages is the fact that while we do have abundance of water in some places, water is not super portable. So if the East Coast has a ton of rain, that's not really going to help California when it's in its drought period. Plus, it takes a while for water to get replenished. Like I mentioned earlier, it can take 1,000 years for a reserve underground to replenish its water supply. So even though water, yes, is a renewable resource, in areas with very little precipitation, water becomes non-renewable at the local level. There are many communities that suffer from droughts and little access to water. In fact, over 2 million people across just the US do not have running water or flushing toilets. The community I want to focus on today is the Navajo Nation. Now, in my Food Deserts video, I talked about the fact that while this is a very large reservation, there are only 13 grocery stores. But besides being a food desert, the Navajo Nation also has very little access to running water. In fact, 30% of its population has no running water. So for this community and so many others like it, this has greatly elevated the impact of COVID-19 on the people living there because they have to find these water sources. Usually it's located miles away and people all have to drive there and wait in line and they can't be socially distanced. So this virus is really highly impacting these people just so that they can meet their daily water needs. So next time you run your faucet or flush the toilet or take a shower, be sure to realize the privilege that comes along with having that and not wondering if you're going to be able to find running water. The United States has a very successful water and sanitation system, but it wasn't designed for everyone in mind. So poor communities and communities of color have been intentionally left out of this infrastructure so that it can benefit everybody else. So again, find gratitude for running water because so many people live without it. So I wanted to talk about a couple ways to conserve water so that more people can have access to it, hopefully, and we don't deplete our local resources. So the first tip, some of y'all might hate me for this, but the first tip is to reduce your meat consumption. So generally, meat has a higher water footprint than crops do. It takes about 924 gallons of water to produce one steak. And I'm not telling you that you have to be vegan or vegetarian. That's not what I'm saying. I know diet is very individualistic and personal, so I'm not here to tell you what you should and should not eat. But if you're able to just even eat one less steak a year, you're saving like 44 bathtubs worth of water. So if that's what you can do, amazing. If you want to try a meatless Monday or just try cooking a vegetarian meal every now and then that's a great way to conserve a lot of water. My second tip is to reduce your food waste. Now, I recently made a video about this, and in it I mentioned that 40% of America's food is wasted. never eaten. So because food is all water intensive, in order to not just buy the products that are using a ton of water to get produced and then throwing them in the trash, buy what you eat and eat what you buy. Simple as that, so it doesn't go to waste and we're not creating demand for something that's simply gonna end up in the trash. My third tip is pretty basic probably, but it's just to take shorter showers. Pretty self-explanatory, but every minute you're in the shower, you're using about 2.5 gallons of water, which is a lot of water, y'all. And showering makes up 17% of your household water usage on average. And the typical American household uses about 40 gallons of water a day just on showers. So if you can just minimize your shower by even a minute, that's saving gallons and gallons and gallons of water every year. And then my last tip is to buy fewer clothes, because like food, clothes are also very water intensive. For one single cotton t-shirt, over 700 gallons of water is used. 700 gallons. That's wild. That's enough water for a person to drink for 2.5 years for one t-shirt. So the less clothing you consume, the less water resources will be in demand to create clothing. So rewear what you have, buy secondhand if that's available to you and you're being responsible about it, and just lessen that demand a little bit, because that is so much water. And that's it, y'all. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please hit the thumbs up button. It really helps me out. And subscribe and ring the little bell if you haven't. And I will see y'all next time. Bye.